All right, to start off, raise of hands, who uses Slack on a daily basis? So daily basis, excellent. Who has written a Slack bot before? All right, good, okay. Well, hopefully this will be educational. Let's see here. So this came about, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Joe Heth. I work for a company called Outdoorsy. It is the, basically think about Airbnb, but for RVs, recreational vehicles. So renters and owners pair up to rent an RV and have a vacation. One of my tasks, I've been working for them for about a year, and one of my tasks about 6 months ago was to fix our bot, right? So we call our Outdoorsy bot Indoorsy because it's helpful to our Indoorsy team. So my next question is, if you were to create a bot, what would you name it? Any fun names? I saw one the other day for Kit, like from Knight Rider. Any fun names? Botfly? Yeah. I used one previously at a different company, not a Slack bot, but we called it GLaDOS, right? The computer from Portal, thank you. Twinkie? All right. I was saying, if you guys have a name, yell it out.
Mine was called WoodyBot.
WoodyBot?
It was hosted on a Raspberry Pi that was screwed down on a piece of wood.
Oh, nice. That's sweet.
Glitch.
Glitch. That's a good one. Yeah. All right. Maybe I'll use when we go to name the bot, we can pick one of those names in. Okay. So yeah, I'm not going to go a ton deep into like the Slack API. So if you were looking to learn a ton about the Slack API, that's not really what I'm going to do. I'll touch on some basics or fundamentals. But I'm going to be focusing on a project that helps you build Slack bots so that you don't have to care about the API. So an abstraction, right? So we don't have to know about all the nitty-gritty details. So if you want to get started building a Slack bot, we need a few things. One is a Slack account. These are free. Anybody can go create one, and you need to be the administrator of one. So if your company has one, or if you just want to create a personal one, they're free to do so. The next thing you need is a project, a GitHub open source project called Botkit. So you can just do a Google search for Botkit and it'll pop up. Botkit is also kind of an abstraction around different chat APIs. So if you don't want to do Slack, you can use it to build a Facebook chat app or a Microsoft bot or one of the other things that it supports here. So we are going to be specifically focusing on the Slack portion of Botkit. But if you go to botkit.ai, this is kind of the main page. They have great documentation. You can clone the repo. Or what you can do, which I haven't done yet, I need to pitch this, is I created a sample repo so that you can hopefully just get up and running right out of the box just by cloning this repository. So jheth is my GitHub handle. Slackbot example is what we're going to be going through today. Okay, so the other thing, this is JavaScript, and because it's running on a command line, we need Node, right? So you're going to need Node and NPM. Helpful tools for development is ngrok. Anybody familiar with ngrok? A few of you? Okay, great. So when I give these talks, I really like to give also how I do development. I love to develop everything locally. I don't want to have to push something out to a server every time I touch code. So what that means is often you need these external services to be able to call back to you, right? I need them to call this laptop right here. So I can either do some fancy DNS with my own domain name and all that kind of stuff, or you can download ngrok and let it do all the hard work, and it will essentially open up a tunnel through whatever Wi-Fi you're on and give you a publicly accessible URL that Slack can call back to. And then finally, the very end, hopefully if we get through everything, we will push this out to Heroku, where we host our Slack bot for our production purposes. And we'll show you how to do local development and then push it out to Heroku for live use. Okay, so first thing we need to do is create a Slack bot. So once you've created your Slack account, we need to create an application. So historically, maybe I don't even need to go to this, bots were done very differently. Bots were like their own thing. You created a bot or you created an app. Slack has done away with that. You now create an app and you give it bot permissions. So we'll just go through the flow here. So our app name is going to be our, well, I already have one called Indie Tech Talks, so we'll just call it our, we'll call it Glitch since that pops into my head. Okay. So glitch will just be the name of the app. That does not mean it's the name of the bot. It's just the name of the app. Okay, so we're going to pick the workspace that we want to work in. So I'm going to pick Ember.js. That was the former Slack channel for the Ember.js meetup. Not used very often, so I got to play around in there. So we're creating the app, assigning it to a workspace. All right, so the next thing is permissions, right? So everything that happens here is basically through OAuth and tokens. So we need permissions to things. So let's talk about a few, actually let me jump back to my slides, or did I just get rid of my slides? I did, hold on a second, guys, my bad. I should have kept that window open. Okay, so we're gonna create a bot, which we just did, and let's see what the next step is. Well, yeah, we might be going out of order here a little bit. Okay, let's talk through the things that a Slack bot can do. So the first thing is, well, let's do this. We'll just add a bot right now. We'll just say, let's add a bot user to my app. Is glitch okay with everybody, or do we want a different name? We'll go with that? Okay. We're gonna add this bot user. And that should be saved. Okay, I'm gonna go back up to the top level just so we can see things here. So we have bots enabled. So 3 big things that you can do, maybe more. The things I'm going to be focusing on are slash commands. So that's when you're in Slack and you can do slash something, right? So Slack has some built-in slash commands. I don't know, can I make this bigger? Oh yeah, maybe I can. Good. Okay. So you just hit the slash key and...
It's behind your head right now.
Oh, it's behind my head? Okay, let me raise this up. Is that better? Yeah, okay. So slash commands, right? Slack is friendly and gives you a list of things that you can do. Right, you can mark yourself away. This is a built-in thing, right? You can say do not disturb, invite a friend to a channel, right? These are slash commands. So we want to enable this for slash commands, so we're going to create a new one. And the first one we're going to do is one we call Chuck. So a popular Slack bot or bot thing to do is to have it tell you a fun Chuck Norris joke. So we're going to have it do that, right? It tells you a funny joke, and then there's no usage for this. So the big thing here is that Slack does everything through callbacks, right? So it's a JSON API, and it's just doing HTTP gets like all over the place. So we need a request URL so that it knows where to talk to my bot. So this is where ngrok comes in. So I'm going to say, hey, ngrok, I want to start up a web port on 8000. I'm going to host. Do I not know the command for this? HTTP. Yeah, thank you. Don't do that a whole lot, but let's see. Okay. All right, so you can see ngrok here, hopefully. So it's given me a public URL, both HTTP and HTTPS, right? And it's redirecting or routing all traffic to my localhost port 8000. Okay, so now that I have an ngrok URL, I want to copy and paste this into my request URL. And then the key part here for Botkit is that it uses the endpoint Slack receive. So, and I'll show you the docs for that in a little bit, but Slack receive, everything goes through that endpoint. That's what kind of makes it really nice. Not everything needs a different endpoint. The annoying part is every slash command can have a different endpoint, so it gets a little repetitive. So we're going to save that as a bot command. We're going to create another one called GitHub. We're going to give it the same URL, and it's going to say get information about a user or org, and it's going to be user or org, and then username. Okay. Actually, we'll just do a couple more. This is the part I was debating whether to do this in front of you or not, because it's a little tedious. But hopefully we'll just type this in real quick. Okay, so these will be a few of them. We may add more later. This last one is I'm going to show you a command that we use at Outdoorsy, but just another example of talking to an API. So we're going to ask for a user ID. It's going to go out to my company's Outdoorsy API and pull in some user information. So these are slash commands. The next big thing would be interactive components. So these are things that pop into a chat room that ask you a question, right? And they have buttons or toggles or something, yes or no, or it needs feedback. So we want interactive components, so we're just going to turn that on, and we're going to give it the same Slack receive URL. We'll do incoming webhooks here in a little bit. So for now, yeah, we're just going to deal with these two, and we'll grow from there. So as I mentioned, a Slack bot needs to OAuth with your org, right? It's essentially a user, and it needs to be a trusted user. So to perform that OAuth process, Botkit takes care of that for you, which is really handy. It just needs to know a callback URL. So it's going to be our same ngrok endpoint, but followed up with OAuth. All of this is in the slides as well, or I think most of it is, so we'll probably get redundant when we go back over there. Okay, so I think we saved it. All right, so the big thing that you need once you've created your bot, so we've registered our bot with Slack, and now we need to grab some information. Actually, let's do this real quick. So it's named glitch. We're gonna throw up a bot logo here just to make it a little more friendly. It'll upload. But we need to grab some information for our bot. So the big thing that you often do with OAuth is a client ID and a client secret, right? So we have this client ID that I'm going to just copy and paste over here. So in the project file that I'm using, we're going to be using locally a .env file. So a lot of different languages have this concept of a .env file. It's great for sourcing your environment, right? So you don't have to have hard-coded variables. It's also great when you go to deploy to Heroku, because Heroku basically forces you to, or not forces you, but encourages you to put everything in environment variables. It also makes your app super flexible or configurable. So we're going to come in here, and this is another bot that I was using earlier, so we're going to just replace some of these values. So I'm going to show my client ID, client secret, paste these into the env file. So you need not only those two things, but you need your bot OAuth token as well. So to get that, you come down here into OAuth permissions. At least you're supposed to. You know what, I think that happens once you install it into your app. I forget this step sometimes. So far we haven't touched any code yet, right? There's a lot of configuration in Slack that needs to go on. So what I'm going to do is install this app to my workplace. Actually, and what I need to do first is start it up. So to do that, I'm just going to say node index.js. So index.js is the main bootstrap file that's going to be our bot. It is reading this env file like I mentioned, so it's going to run on port 8000, and it's going to use the bot ID, client, and secret to connect. You know what? The bot token I feel like always eludes me, because the bot token should be available prior to. Come on. All right. Yeah, we'll do this. Okay. Okay, there we go. So once you've installed it, it creates your bot user OAuth token. Did you have a question? Okay. So we're going to copy the bot user OAuth token now that it's connected to my Slack channel. And that's all we're going to do for now. Okay, so now I can start this guy up. I have it in debug mode, so we're going to see a lot of chatter in here, which is very helpful for development purposes. And then what we're going to do over here is, I already have a bot over here, but we should be able to say glitch is not in this channel. And we're going to see if we can, oh no, I'm sorry. OAuth, that's the thing. Before I can invite him in here, he needs to be authed in. So what we do here is we follow our this ngrok URL, and this part's a little bit manual, so I apologize, or I don't apologize, this is kind of how Slack does it. So part of the Botkit, it has a login route. So once we hit this login route, it's going to go over and essentially identify or log into to this Ember.js account. So success. One of the things I need to point out here along this line, which I haven't really talked about yet, is that Botkit keeps state. It needs to hold these OAuth tokens, client IDs. It needs to know about your user, people it's communicating with, conversations, right, messages. The Slack API needs to know all of these special IDs. So because of that, the Botkit needs some kind of internal storage. So if I were to just shut down the app, it would lose everything, right? So We have some options right now. Right now, it won't. I'm storing everything locally to a file. So it will persist things to disk as I'm developing, so I can start and stop the app as much as I want, and it won't lose. I don't have to re-authenticate every single time. Once we get into a production-like environment, we'll use Redis as an in-memory cache for the bot to keep track of everything. So there is, I guess, a little bit of magic happening there. But okay, now that the bot is authenticated, I should be able to invite them into this channel room. And right there, the bot has joined the channel, and I'll show you in a second. It says Indie Tech Talks is here, right? So let's go look at that real quick. Actually, before I do that, let's just start walking through this file a little bit. I'm a little haphazard here on like the order of events that I'm going in. Anybody have questions, I guess, just on the initial Slack bot creation? So far we've done everything, almost everything, just in Slack's web interface. Maybe that was pretty quick for jumping through here, but there were a lot of clicks that we kind of have to do. Then we have our Slack app that is actually now running, right, as a node application, and let's step through the index file a little bit here. So you can see up top here, most of the things, well, we have a couple system, like node things that we need to bring in, dependencies, and then we have a bunch of stuff that I've developed. So most of these imports that I'm using are going to be our Slack commands, or things that we want Slack to do. You can see here we have some code for reading that environment file. So if that file exists in our local development environment, then we want to use that for our environment settings. Otherwise, like out on Heroku, it won't read that. And then you can see we're configuring our bot with our different options, right? Our client ID and our client secret, our debug, the scope that we're using. Then we'll just jump down here, right? So we essentially just create a Slack bot with options, right? So it makes it pretty easy. And then you spawn off this process, and for my usages, you don't have to. It uses this thing called the real-time protocol. So it will tell you whether your bot is online or offline by whether it really is offline or online. There's a setting that you can just have it always be visible, but it may not really be available. A lot of this is just boilerplate that you'll get from like the Botkit documentation or starter app. But here's the whole OAuth process. So you're starting, well, not just that, but you're starting a web server. It's using Node's Express web server to handle all the requests. It's setting up webhook endpoints, which we'll do in a little bit, and then it's also setting up those OAuth endpoints as well. So you can have it do whatever you want on OAuth success. I just had it send out a success message. Then from there, you have this, well, I guess what I've named, or what Botkit often names, a controller. So this is essentially your bot. And now we get to talk about Botkit. So Botkit has a bunch of helper methods that makes building a Slack bot really simple. So one of them is listening for events. So this bot channel join, right, is an event that the bot is now listening to. So once it joins a channel like we just saw, it's going to then reply with this text message. Almost all of the Botkit functions take two parameters, the bot and then the message that's coming in, because again, messages are important, right? You need to know who you're replying to. Are you in a thread? Are you private? Are you public? Slack needs to keep track of all of these things. We don't need to really think about those because Botkit gives us some nice helpers, but realize that that's what's happening. If somebody else were to join the channel, it would say welcome to the channel. That's what this is, if other non-bot users join this channel. And then kind of just the basic functionality that you don't need to do anything with is this here's concept, right? So here's is listening for messages, right? So here let's do this one right here. Tell me a secret. So if I'm in here and I just say tell me a secret, Botkit says let's take this private, and then he tells me a secret, right? So here are some fun things about, I guess, Botkit and, I guess, kind of events, right? So this here's right here can be a string literal, it can be a regex. I think there's a couple, maybe something else it can be, but you can have multiple here. And then what you do is you tell it when you want it to listen, right? Is it a direct mention, like I've added this user, right? Like, hey, at glitch, tell me a secret, right? And then they'll do it again. Ambient is what I did the first time. I didn't mention anybody's name. I didn't mention the bot. I just said something, right? And Botkit heard it and then can reply. Mention, don't know the distinct difference, but it's basically another mention, but somewhere else in the message. And then just as an example, right, there's this concept of a conversation that Slack can keep track of. And then you can see it has just some nice helper methods for say. Here and say, right, are kind of the basic things. And you actually don't need to hook up any slash commands or interactive messages or anything. Like you kind of get the here, say thing just by default, because they're both connected to the Slack channel and receiving some events. So ephemeral here means private, so that's what this little parameter does. I also did another one here, like, did you hear me? Or did you hear as a direct mention, right? So if I said, hey, at glitch, did you hear about that? It should say, I heard you. Right, so here and say is really simple. These things you can also do, I think, or you used to be able to do from the Slack app, or from just Slack configuration. You can make your kind of own bot responses, but wanted to show that it is part of the API here. What we use this for heavily, so I'll go into this one next, is actually one of our user commands. So our Slack bot is a huge benefit to our customer support team. So don't just think Slack bots are for development. That's not true. We need to, I guess, think about what other usages in the company would a bot be helpful for. So we have it for our customer success when they have a question and they say, hey, I have an issue with this user or this rental or this booking. They can just type that into the Slack channel and say, hey, Joe, I have an issue with user, and is it user or users? User 3. And what it'll do is it's listening for that, right? It's an ambient mention of user, right? It's looking for the word user. And then I have some code in here that's like parsing it out to figure out what user you're interested in. We can kind of glance over this kind of quick. I have a little helper method here for replying. And then what I'm doing here in this case is I'm replying in a thread. So if you're in a customer support channel and you have 30 reps like we do, all trying to field cases, you don't want everybody in that same channel trying to field a case, right? So we kick you off into your own separate thread, and you continue the conversation over there. So you can see here my bot replied. I can click the reply, and it started a new thread. And we have a little fun here. It says it's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Does anybody know the reference or? No? Yes? Come on, what is it? Ben, right? Yeah.
Legend of Zelda.
Yes, right. Legend of Zelda. So, right, you have fun with your Botkit. So, right, this is a Zelda sword. So you take this when you have trouble. So what this did is when I hit that user command, what it did is it went out to my Outdoorsy file, which knows how to do a GET request against the Outdoorsy API, and it pulled, not rental information, but it pulled a user from our API. It pulled out the information that we wanted, right? And what I did is I trimmed it down a little bit. I basically just gave you his social links, his bio, and his avatar image. So we take the information from the API that we want, and we then massage it into the Slack JSON that Slack wants, right? So that is part of the Slack API that you do need to know. So we'll go look at this build user response just to show you that it's not magic. So the user that I get in here for build user response is just a plain old JSON, like just a Java object or JavaScript object, right? Just keys and values. So the part of the documentation that you do need to read is about this attachment, right? And all of the fields that an attachment takes. So we're building up the title of the message, we're adding a link, we can color things, you can add an array of fields. So that's what this is over here. Like this is a field that we've added, right? Social links, bio is a field that we've added. And I think even maybe that's it. I guess I went pretty simple here. So if you have social links, I'm going to iterate through those links and push those onto an attachment field. If you have a bio description, right, I'm going to just push that on as a field. So this part here, this building up of this JSON object is Slack specific. And I can open up the documentation for that here in a little bit, but yeah, we'll kind of skip over that right now. And then once I have it, I am doing this bot response, right, which is that function we just talked about up here. It's replying in a thread, and off we go, right? So the bot has done its work, and people can now have a side conversation over here. So same thing is true for, this should also, the opposite of like this here, starting a conversation would be that slash command, right? So I added a slash command. So it's the same thing, it's gonna hit the same code for user 3, but it's gonna bring it right into the channel that we're in, right? So it is going to pollute it. I did keep this private, so this is only for me. So again, right, things don't have to be public. You can make them private if it's just, you're the one that's interested in this. So you can do the hearsay, you can do the slash commands. Let's drop down here a little bit. Okay, so slash commands, I guess I was a little bit ahead of myself, but to listen for slash commands with Botkit, all you have to do is say on slash command. And when it does that, you'll be fed the message that was sent in and the command, or the command is part of the message. So again, we have this kind of generic, or maybe not generic, this helper bot response. Yes, it's a little bit duplicated from the one above, but we're not focusing on that right now. So it's basically just a switch statement, right? What slash command did I receive? I received the user command. And this is where in Slack, with Slack bots and with the Slack API, you do need to know a little bit. Slack expects a response pretty quick. So it's like less than a second or less than 3 seconds or something like that. It wants to know that your bot has received it and that you're doing something. So one thing you can do is just say reply acknowledge, right? Like tell Slack right away, hey, I got this thing. And then you can follow up with something else, right? So that's this back to back. Actually, let's try our Chuck command here to make sure we got it. All right, so there's Chuck, right? Noah was the only man notified before Chuck relieved himself in the Atlantic Ocean, right? Yeah, there you go. So no results for Google. So you can see here, right, if a Chuck command comes in, we can do whatever we want with that. If the user command comes in, we can again do different things, right? I replied publicly for the Chuck joke because everybody wants to see those, but maybe not everybody wants to see me, tracking down a user. Let's go ahead and try the GitHub thing. So if I said GitHub and if I did this right, and I say user jheth, it will go out, hit the public, freely available GitHub API, no tokens, no anything, and pull back some public info.
So is this switch statement separate from the here statement?
Yes, it is. Yep.
So they don't work together?
They do not. They do not. Yeah, good question. So yeah, hearsay is its own thing. It's listening for messages in your channel, right? Just messages that are going by. Where slash commands are specifically configured commands. If you remember back in the Slack app over here, I had to specifically say these are the slash commands that I want. So I could delete all of these Slack commands and the hearsay stuff would still all work. Yeah. So yeah, you may not need Slack commands, right? Maybe hearsay is all you need and you can do less configuration.
Why would you use one over the other?
Yeah, I think that's just preference. So
they can
depends.
Use everything in the slash commands or even everything in your statement?
Yeah. I think there are, I guess for commands, I'll show you one specifically that is a little more useful. Well, like this GitHub one, right? I probably don't want to create some kind of regular expression that says, hey, look for GitHub space name, right? In a message or in every message, right? That's a lot of examining. That it seems more intentional, right? Maybe that's the right word. It's more intentional that you're doing this slash command. But I would say that, yeah, I guess it's kind of up to you how you want your bot to work. So we got our GitHub thing, and we can look at these APIs here in a little bit if you want. They're very basic, just like node fetch commands to certain URLs. The next one I want to point out, which is super helpful for our customer support team, or really anybody in the company, but then helps integrate the rest of the company with development, is actually reporting a bug. So You guys might know you have ticket systems in your company. Maybe not everybody has access to them. You don't want client support, or you don't want somebody to just start creating tickets anywhere they want to. You might want some more control around it. Or you don't want to make them open up a web browser and log into whatever ticketing system and go through their interface, right? People are in Slack, they're talking, like that's where they're working, so bring functionality to them in Slack. So we have this new bug / command that I need to create over here. So we're going to report a bug. This is the annoying part about the callbacks. I need to copy this thing. Yeah, okay. So bug command. It's going to receive it, create a bug in Asana. Asana is a ticketing system that we use, and there's no usage hint. We're just going to say go. Okay, so the cool thing here is you don't have to re-auth often. You don't have to re-auth when making these changes like that. I added that / command, and it's immediately available in Slack, which is pretty cool. There's a couple things that if you change them, it will flag you and say you have to reinstall your bot because it has to get some new permissions, but right now it doesn't. So we talked about / commands. Now we're going to get into these interactive components. So interactive components are like dialogues, modal pop-ups. Maybe you've never seen those in Slack, but you can build windowing like dialogues in Slack to take input. And then the other thing are called message actions, which is this triple dot over here. So this triple dot opens up, and I now have a file a bug action on every message. So this is and I might not know the names exactly. This is like a message action over here. And then what we're going to do over here is a dialog box here. So I'm going to hit the / command for bug, and it just builds it. Well, I'll show you the code for building this modal. Builds out a modal. It says, right, site is down, fix it. You can configure these drop-down boxes, right? We'll say, hey, this is critical, notify the engineers, right? So this is where our company is kind of connected to engineering this way. So depending on the severity that you choose will determine whether I get bothered or not. So you can then choose an app. We have several different applications that we develop, right? We have our main outdoorsy.com site. We have an iOS app. We have internal admin tools for our customer support. And then we have a company for Wheelbase, which is for RV dealerships. Just FYI. And we'll just say that. What this is actually going to do, and I can show you here in a little second, but what it does for us is it takes this, compiles it into the JSON that Asana API wants, and we post it up to our Asana API, and then it returns back to us a direct link to a ticket. So if all goes well, we should get a pseudo link, but maybe we won't. There we go. Okay, good. But you see that delay, right? That took a few seconds to do. That's where the Slack API can freak out on you, and you'll start to get messages like, "Whoa, hey, your bot just timed out. We don't know what happened." So that acknowledgement right away is very helpful while you're going off and doing work. So this did not actually go out and talk to my Asana API because I didn't want it to go create a ticket, but I'll show you what it did because this one is maybe not the most relevant, but I feel like this is a very relevant use case. So I have an Asana JS file that I just put my Asana code in here, right? It has a single function that takes a workspace, which is just like your application ID or your account ID. And then the JSON of the information that we just entered into that dialog, it does a post to Asana and authenticates with a token that is in your environment file, not hard-coded in your code. And then it returns back the JSON response. So that's what ours does in production. So this is literally our production code for Asana. What I had it do is actually hit a different API called request bin. So again, when testing APIs, it's super helpful when you're testing an API, especially webhooks, to see what that data is. So request bin is just that thing. You can spat data into request bin, and it's just like a blank canvas, I guess, right? And it will show you data. So I have it hosted as a Heroku app, but if I go look at this data, oh, not that, take off that. No, maybe I need to inspect. There we go, okay. So request bin here shows me the data that it received, or it should, or here it is right here. So what I did is I just posted the data from that form just so that you could see it out here, right? So it was this data hash, it has a name for your ticket name, it has notes for the description, and I guess that's about it. So this is just helpful for me to do testing, right? I didn't want to ping Asana, I wanted to just see what it looked like for my own usages. So request bin is a really helpful tool for that. It's a it's a GitHub repo that you can just say like deploy now on Heroku. There's a few other ones like HTTP paste bin or something like that, but another development tool I use often when working with APIs. So you have your slash command of a bug, right? So that was, hey, somebody just called in, I got an email, customer support can say bug, fill that in, and it then gets filed in Asana for us. The other thing you can do is if, hey, developers are chatting in a chat room, right, we're talking about Chuck Norris here, and we're like, oh man, that's really a bug, right? Let's file that as a bug, right? And what this should do is, again, pop the modal dialog. Oh, this might be, no, hold on. Interesting. That should have popped the same modal dialog, but I'm wondering if that's where my interactive messages needs to get set up. Yes, it does, okay. I did not register that action with my Slack app, right? So that's considered an interactive component. So, I'm going to create a new action called file a bug. This file's a bug. And then the callback ID is unique, right? It's kind of like that slash command. So I think we call it bug report. Yep. So this is just a unique ID, right? It's yours to name. Doesn't matter what it is. You just don't want to have duplicate names. So I'm going to register that action with my system. And what we're now jumping into is this thing called a message action, right? So we were up in slash commands. Now this controller on message action is going to get fired. And we have only one case here for bug report. And it's going to call the same exact line of code, right? I have it abstracted out into a function for replying with the bug dialog, right? So you can come in through different angles. You could even set it up as a hearsay, right? Say, I need to report a bug, and it could pop this dialog for you in a hearsay approach as well. So now I should be able to try this guy again. Say, file a bug. Maybe. See if I'm getting any errors. Don't appear to be. What's that? Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what that one is. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I think I was using the wrong file of bug. I think I was hitting my other bot that's in here instead of the glitch one. So let's try that. There we go. Talking to the wrong bot, and that other bot is not started up, so that's a problem. So this one's low, right? Not of importance, but I can submit that too, and it will reply back with my new ticket ID, right? So let's see here. Okay, so those are message actions. I didn't do any other examples of message actions, but you can kind of start thinking through, hey, is there ever time you get a message and you want to do something with that, right? So let's take a real quick look at the reply bug dialog. This is specifically, well, this is just how Botkit does it, right? So when you call this function, we're saying we're creating a dialog, right? You're giving it a title and a unique identifier, and the action name, and then it's like a builder, right? A dialog builder. Let's add a text title field. Let's add select options. Let's add another select option for my app. Let's add a text area that's my description with a placeholder, and then Botkit has a special function for reply with dialog. Everybody seeing this okay? So then you take this dialog object and you have to convert it to this as object, and then it replies, and then you don't care what happens after that. So, yeah?
What's those first three arguments before you add select?
Wait, these three arguments, or?
On add select.
Yep. Wait, these three?
Yep. At 144.
144? Oh, add select, sorry, wasn't listening. So severity is the actual label, like the text label that you see. Severity is going to be the JavaScript object, or when you get back JSON, that's going to be like the JSON key that's in there, right? And then low is the default selected value, right? So here are my list of options. Low is going to be the default, right? Because we don't want critical to be the default, because then everybody would leave it as critical. But then yeah, severity, when I go to process this message, and I can show you that, like I can show you where we pull out title, severity, app. Okay, so that's how you build it. That's message action. Let's jump down to dialog submission. So when you hit that submit button, right, stuff has to happen again, right? And again, it's all HTTP requests going back and forth. So dialog submission comes to our app. We immediately say okay, right? We okay the dialog so that Slack doesn't error out. And then you can see right here from the submission, the JavaScript object that I got back, these are the keys that were configured there. So here's severity, here's app, here's title, here's description, right? So I'm massaging that into the format that Asana wants. And then you can see these are all promises, right? It's JavaScript, everything's asynchronous, so these are all venables. So you know, if it's successful, then I want to reply back with the name that you gave me for the ticket, but then also a link out to that ticket so you can open it up. Otherwise, if there's some kind of error, I'll just reply privately to say, right, unable to create your card. So dialog submission is another one of those events. Yes, okay, great. I'm going to jump over to my slides here, and we're going to probably roll through all of these because we already did that, right? So we already went through these steps of getting started, except for the npm install. The OAuth login process, right? So all of these slides will walk you through it again if this was too fast or if I was too disjointed here, but it'll show you kind of the steps that need to happen here. We've gone through most of these message events. These are the hearsay, right, events. Bot received, bot addressed. Again, I guess we're just recapping bot hear and say conversations. Slash commands, these are going to also be where I put hopefully helpful links for you guys if you want to follow back up with this. The documentation for these are all very good, right, that show you the details of things. I was going to go to the message structure, but that's all right. Yeah, okay, so we haven't gotten to some fun stuff yet, so are you guys good to keep going? I think we're at about 45 minutes here. Okay. All right, so next thing, so we talked about slash commands, we got some dialogues, submissions, we got message events, right? Another thing that we didn't do are interactive callback messages. So these are like those questions, yes or no. This was the functionality I got to build into our Slack bot. So if you go out to outdoorsy.com, I'll just show you the use case or the workflow here. Let's find a rental. Right down here, this report this listing. So this report this listing is for like, maybe it's fraudulent, maybe the pictures are bad, maybe I think it's a scam, right? It's inappropriate, whatever. So this workflow here, when I hit this button, it like pings an API on our backend. It hits a REST API of ours. That API then messages into Slack with this message of yes or no. It messages right into the customer support channel or our trust and safety team that says, hey, somebody just flagged this rental, like, is it good or bad, yes or no? If they click, yes, it's fine, we don't do anything. If they say no, I then make an immediate request to our Outdoorsy API and delete that rental. So it's a nice support workflow from our app to Slack, like where an engineer doesn't have to get involved really. So to do that, you use some of the Slack functionality for webhooks. So incoming webhooks are what we're going to turn on now. This is super helpful. I guess this is one of those things where we need to reinstall. So we'll just click the reinstall. We're going to post into, so webhooks, yeah, you have to pick the channel that they're going to talk into. So you have to authorize it for that specific channel. What it does is it creates a uniquely identifiable hook, right? So now I can post pretty much whatever I want to this URL and it'll pop it right into that Slack channel. So I'm going to copy this URL. over here to my environment file. I'm going to swap out the incoming webhook file that was for my other bot. I'm going to kill my bot and restart it because I changed the environment variable. Okay, so what I'm now going to simulate is I have a where'd it go? Post webhook. All right. So I have an example. I have just this JSON blob that I'm going to post into this webhook, and this one has to be Slack specific, right? So here's that attachments key again, and this is the exact JSON blob that we get from our website when you click this link. So we'll just walk through it real quick, right? We have a title and some text. You can fall back, like if something doesn't work for some reason. This callback ID is the important part, right? Just like like dialogues and / commands, like Slack needs to know what you're talking about here. So this callback ID is what your code is looking for. I'm marking it as a warning, and then I have actions, right? So I have an actions array. One of them is going to be, and it's a choice, right? I'm going to have an approve button, and you can give it a value and a style. I then have a second choice for delete, which has a value and a style. So these values are also important. These are the values that your code is going to be looking for. And then you can even confirm, right? So this is all in the Slack documentation for their messages, right? But are you sure you really want to delete this? So, and then what I do down here is I'm just using node fetch, and I'm going to post this blob of JSON up into this incoming webhook. You actually don't need any authorization because the webhook is secure by obscurity, essentially. So, so if I just bash post, node post webhook. So flow of control, right? I'm going to post to this webhook. Slack's going to then post into my channel. So that should have been good. So we just got this new message, right? New message from Glitch. This is my rental approval request, and it has these two actions, right? So I'm not going to click them yet. I want to go look at the code on how this happens. So again, controller on, interactive message callback, right? So if this is the first time we're adding this, we would now need to start listening to these callback messages. So once this gets received, it has a callback ID, right? So the message that comes in, I'm looking for a callback ID, and I am specifically looking for rental, some number, flagged, right? Does it meet that regular expression? So once I have that, I can parse out, I know what rental ID it is, so I know how to take some action. Based on, let's see here, so I have the text, right, that came in from that attachment, so that attachment body has some text. And then I'm grabbing my actions, right? I'm grabbing the first action, and that's really the response. It's what did the person click. So if the value is approve, then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mention that user who clicked the button. Or sorry, no, I'm not. I'm just going to include their user as the one that approved it. I'm going to reply interactive, right? So this is a different API call. It's not reply private or public or whatever. It's reply interactive with my own message, and it's just going to be a brief text message. If they click to delete, I give you a different emoji for skull and crossbones, and it's been deleted. Right now, this does nothing here, right? If you were looking at our production API, you would see outdoorsy.delete rental, and it would go off and like call the API and delete that rental from our system. So I click approve, and it just says it replaces the actions, right? And Botkit is doing all that for us, right? So it just says, hey, Jay hath approved this rental. If I post another one in here, I can say delete. This is the confirmation block, right? I can click yes, and then it says, hey, you've deleted that guy. So that's interactive messages, right? When you have a choice, a selection, you know, if you've taken a poll or whatever I'm trying to survey, something like that, right? That's through interactive messages. So incoming webhooks, that is one usage, I should say, of an interactive message. You can do interactive messages without webhooks, but it was a good way for me to show kind of both of them working together. We do some interesting things with critical logging events. So in our API, if something bad happens or something we want to closely monitor, like we have specific channels that messages will go into. We deal a lot with payment processing. So if like Stripe errors start happening, we actually will ping a webhook that sends messages into like our payment errors channel. So it can be used as a form of server-side logging. I would say it's not the best form of doing that, but it can get your attention. So yeah, webhooks can be used for a variety of things. So Heroku Deploy, which we can do if you want. It's the same thing that we've done here. These are the exact commands. If you copy and paste these, it will deploy this out into Heroku. The one thing you have to do is copy up your environment variables, right? So this .env file, these all need to become Heroku environment variables. So as a part of this repo, you can actually do this with a real quick bash file that reads your environment file line by line, and then it calls Heroku config set for each one of those things, and then your app is up and ready to go. I was going to do one more. Does anybody want to walk through the Heroku events, or is that really not interesting? No, okay. I was going to do one more, but I think we're running low on time, but I'll show it to you real quick. Another great example here, which we recently started using, is Zapier. So Zapier is one of those APIs, is a product solely meant for connecting API to API. And hopefully without any development, right? If you have things that are going into Salesforce that you want to get into a Google spreadsheet, or you have, I don't know, if you want to post a message somewhere and you want it to post to Twitter or post it to Slack or something, right? Zapier is this API connector tool. So let's see here real quick. We'll just try to do it real quick and see if it does it. What I did last night is I created one of these events with my own personal account. You can see what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say tweet, right? And if you're not Jay Heth, I'm not going to let you do it because I didn't want Dave Jones here to mess with my account. But it'll take whatever you post in there, and it'll say, hey, Zapier, send this message off. This is just like one of those webhooks, right? It's a webhook, it's a point. And then Zapier is going to turn around and post this thing to my Twitter. So let's add this to my Slack commands case statement. And then we have to go over to our slash commands over here. Say tweet. I hate it. So I would say the one annoying thing about slash commands and some of this configuration is always having to remember this the callback URL. And the annoying part is, which I'm glad you didn't make me put it on Heroku, is when you put it on Heroku, you have to come back through here and update all of these URLs to the Heroku URL. So that might be one vote for developing on Heroku. So we're going to tell the world that we want to tweet something. All right, so let's see. This will be the last thing I do. All right, so restarted it because I just added code, right? So it didn't auto reload or anything like that. So, but now I have a tweet message, or I should have a tweet command here and say, right. Okay, that was very fast. I made it so. So if we go out to Twitter, oh, come on, baby. Oh, you know what? I did something else last night because I was nervous about it being enabled. And I thought, I don't want to go to sleep and have this thing be enabled. So I was a little bit paranoid, sorry. We're going to turn this on. So your zaps that you create have to be on when you do this. So that means some of my error handling code is not right here because it should have said. Actually, I take that back. Some of the errors don't get back, right? So it successfully talked to Zapier, but it did not tell me that it did not successfully talk to Twitter, I think. So we'll try it again. Tweet. Trying to make this worthwhile, so I don't immediately go delete it. Okay, so now that it's on, there, it's there. So that was, again, another use case scenario of using Zapier to do whatever you want it to do, right? Your bot just has to talk to Zapier, and then you can configure Zapier to talk to whatever else you want it to do. So, I am over my time. Thank you very much. This is all out on these slides are in my GitHub repo, so you can get to all of these resources. Dave Jones is thankfully videotaping this if you want to go back through and watch this hour-long talk. And that is all. Any questions? Yeah.
I noticed you using some TypeScript commands with your JS files. How do you
I'm not using any TypeScript here. I have not done TypeScript work yet, so or at least not knowingly, I should say. Was there, which thing was?
The string interpolation specifically, where you use the $sign brackets.
Oh, that's just ES6. So that's just like, ES6 or ECMAScript 2015 or something like that. So that's not specific to TypeScript. Yeah. Any other questions? Can you guys think of things that you would use a Slack bot for at work? I guess that's the thing I should have said as I'm going through here. Think of things that a Slack bot could do.
You try adding AI to it. I know you can, I read the GitHub, you can add dialogue flow to this, to the bot.
To the Botkit?
Yeah.
Okay. I have not done anything AI oriented with this, with Botkit or Slack in general.
No, it's true. I had a project that I was getting to create a chatbot like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And I didn't know anything about it, but I told him I could do it.
Yeah.
Started using dialogue flow.
Okay.
Basically, it does the same thing, but it's kind of like your phone, where it takes what you're saying and try to figure out how to respond. And you're supposed to be able to connect that with Express API so that you don't have to make as many of those switch statements. It'll do some.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But I wasn't able to do
I would say if it's an API or a
Yeah.
library or something you can call, then you could definitely hook it into any of the Slack flow.
Yeah, but I couldn't get it. And then I saw this repo, and it says it's supposed to make it easy to do, but I never.
Okay.
So I ended up doing like you did, all the way to Express.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say this may not be the cleanest, it may not be the most well organized, but I'm mainly presenting concepts and.
But it worked.
But yeah, it works as well. Yeah.
I saw you were importing Moment. Have you integrated anything that sets off with time based? So any responses or messages that are sent out based on a specific time of day or based on a specific time trigger?
No, we have not. Moment for us is more for just a formatting event. So as I'm spitting back information to like a customer support rep, instead of showing them like a database timestamp, I'm using it just to like pretty print the date. So no, I don't think we have anything time-based right now that I can think of. I know we have some things, we have like cron jobs that will fire off, right? That will fire off and hit code, and that code might end up calling a Slack webhook, right? So it might be an indirect message to us, but not, I haven't done time-based stuff like specifically with the bot. All right, thanks a lot, appreciate it. Thanks for being here.